Hello and a warm welcome to everyone. Myself Manish Prabhakar Singh, Assistant Professor, Department of English, Model College, Kharsawa, affiliated to Kolhan University, Chaibasa. Today's lecture will be on the poem 3 Years He Grew by William Wordsworth. I would try to bring out the imagery and make it easier for you to understand this poem. Before beginning the poem, let us look a little about William Wordsworth. I hope many of you would have heard the name William Wordsworth and even read any of his poems like Daffodils, Tintin Abbey, etc. William Wordsworth brought a completely new approach to the writing of English poetry. One of the greatest English romantic poets, he became poet laureate in 1843. He, along with Robert Southey and Samuel Coleridge, is one of Lakeland poets, a group that is widely credited with beginning with the English Romantic movement. He published many poetry collections like Lyrical Ballad, which placed Wordsworth in quite a unique position in the history of English poetry. Just remember that the word romantic here does not indicate the traditional meaning, but it refers to the love towards nature or love towards God. If you look at the characteristic of Wordsworth's poetry, you will see that for Wordsworth, nature stands supreme. With Wordsworth, the poetry of nature took a new range, passing beyond sensuous presentation and description to vision and interpretation. Wordsworth's philosophy of nature emphasizes upon the divinity of nature. He talks about nature's holiness along with nature as a source of wisdom and moral health. For him, nature is best fitted for the position of men's teacher. According to him, nature was both law and impulse, with powers to kindle and restrain, so that her beauty and fear were equally necessary for the growth of poet's mind. The greatest contribution of Wordsworth to the poetry of nature is his unqualified pantheism. He believes that God shines through all the objects of nature. Another characteristic of Wordsworth's poems was the autobiographical aspect. It reveals his mind and personality. He is always subjective in his treatment of nature and men. He either describes his life and experience or directly reveals some aspects of his personality. Coming back to the poem, 3 Years He Grew was composed in 1798 when Wordsworth was on his visit to Germany along with his sister Dorothy. It was published in Lyrical Ballads. It is one of the five poems that make up the Lucy series and it contains both epithalamic and elegiac characteristics. The word epithalamic is derived from the word epithelium, which was a type of Greek poem composed in the honor of marriage. An elegy is a mournful poem usually written in remembrance of a lost one for a funeral or as a lament. Both these elements are quite clearly represented in this particular poem. In the whole Lucy series, Wordsworth sought to write unaffected English verse infused with abstract ideals of beauty, nature, love, longing, and death. Now, if you look at the title of the poem, there is a word "she" which indicates Lucy. The scholars and critics have been unable to find any real identity related to Lucy, and for many scholars, Lucy could be Wordsworth's muse. The word muse means an inspiration. It is something which could inspire an artist to do his best. This poem is also a lyrical elegy, and in this poem, nature walks as an educator who incorporates values. The poem has seven stanzas, each containing six lines, having AAB CCB rhyming scheme. Before proceeding further, I would just present a rough summary which will help you to get a picture about the poem. The poem begins with nature personified. Here, nature acts as an educator and resolves to educate and rear Lucy, the 3-year-old lovely child. She takes her to make her a lady of her own and would instill in her the laws that will govern the conduct and at the same time fill her with impulse that will impel Lucy to act accordingly. Lucy would grow playful and vibrant amidst the lap of nature. She will live in close communion with the objects of nature and will borrow the graceful movements of nature. She would grow to be a nature loving and would love to stare at midnight stars. She would respond to the bubbling sound of dancing rivers, and amidst the natural surrounding, she would attain graceful womanhood. The last stanza ends with a sudden and premature death of Lucy after Mother Nature's job is finished. The poet feels that in the event of death, Lucy again becomes a part of nature. The overall impression of the poem is very ambiguous, and even though all comforting words were spoken and acknowledged, the words sometimes feel real and tangible to readers. The poem does not deny the unending grief. Now I will try to explain the poem in details to you. If you look at the poem, it feels like a relationship of Lucy and nature. But the details of this relationship are presented by her lover from his point of view. Wordsworth is letting us identify with Lucy, portraying her as a lively 3-year-old playing in the midst of nature. In the second line, you will see nature being personified and saying that she would take the child for herself because she was too beautiful for the earth. Nature has now decided that she will be the guide to Lucy, the one who would bring her up as one of her own. Here, Lucy is compared with a beautiful flower that will eventually bloom and blossom into a lady. She would be crafted in the image of nature. If you look at the beginning of second stanza, you will notice double inverted comma implying that nature is continuing with her explanation. She will be with the child as both law and impulse. All of Lucy's desire, or to say impulses, will originate with or be kindled by nature's overseeing power. Her ability to govern or to restrain will also come from nature. It clearly indicates that Lucy will be wholly influenced by nature. You can see the use of words like rock, plain, earth, glade, bar, all emphasizing Lucy's closeness to nature. Through earth and heaven, forest and garden, nature will be accompanying Lucy, faring along the knowledge which will mold Lucy into a perfect being. The third stanza once again starts with nature elaborating about Lucy. Nature emphasizes vital, spontaneous energy and also equally spontaneous peace. You can see that in the very first line, Lucy is being compared to a fawn, signifying the energized and spontaneous nature. She would possess the vital strength to climb mountains or go upstream a river. But along with that, she will learn the beauty of silence, the peace and serenity. She will embrace both the strength and silence, adding up to her prosperous nature. The fourth stanza starts with the fluffy clouds lending themselves as a pillow, and in their softness Lucy would solace. She will be perfected into a humane form, filled with politeness, decency, prosperity, poise, and charm. You can see that Wordsworth uses the word maiden, indicating her virtue, her charm, and modesty. She will be like a maiden, graceful both in the face of storm and silence. If you look closely at the first four stanzas, the rich pastoral imagery of nature's speech reflects Wordsworth's emphasis of naturalness and spontaneity. If you look at the phrase insensate things in third stanza, it seems to denote and devalue Lucy in a way, prophesying the dark end. The fifth stanza continues nature's narration, stating that the stars will act like her guide, and Lucy, being brought up by the nature, will have the privilege to peep into the secrets of nature. She will be as beautiful as the nature herself, bearing her face. Just look at the fifth and sixth line. It clearly indicates that nature's vigor and feelings would be a part of Lucy, which will let her attain spiritual height. It contains that with nature's upbringing, she will be an incarnation of an ideal state and will grow eventually to attain womanhood. Nature would nurture Lucy's growth, and if you look at the last two lines, they are very important. If you notice the phrase she and I together, it clearly indicates that Lucy is not returning. Many scholars and critics are of the opinion that the nature's role as adopted guardian from the first five stanzas changes into like a companion. The last stanza is now spoken by Wordsworth. Look at the second line. He states that Lucy's race was run, or to say her time on earth was over. In a way, Wordsworth is stating that Lucy has grown to become nature. The last stanza particularly indicates the elegiac nature of the poem. It has left the poet to experience a hollow within. Look at the word heat in the fourth line. It means an open land that is not used for farming. In a way, it symbolizes barrenness. The last line indicates that Lucy is now lost forever, leaving behind a trail of memories. The fragments of Lucy are left behind in the forms of memories for the poet to pick up. If you look closely, the last stanza is the only one in which the poet speaks. Moving towards the theme, I would like to add a definition of Walter Pater. Walter Pater defined romanticism as an addition of strangeness to beauty. In a way, he was talking about harmony between man and nature. Lucy represents that particular harmony. She gets united with the spirit and flesh of nature. The theme of love for nature is developed in a kinship with humanity. You will now remember the word maiden's form, which denotes the very same idea. The poem also brings out the idea of growth and maturity. Lucy grows from a docile girl to a graceful maiden. The benevolence of nature is a protective shield which Lucy will explore to grow horizons. Lucy, when she has grown to become the image that nature wants her to be, she is blessed with eternal sleep to be at unity with the supreme reality. In the very beginning, Lucy is described as a 3-year-old child, an innocent, naive girl. Wordsworth has equated the children with an innocence. Lucy's childhood is denoted by the little simplicity and innocence merging the merriment with sadness at the outcome of Lucy's death. The last important theme brings out the gap between the fantasy and reality. Nature has returned to the poet with the knowledge that Lucy would be what he had imagined, but it will be a vision of distant image, or we can say a distant imagination. In the end, the poet would only be left with the memories, which in reality would be painful and agonizing. Overall, you can see that the poem takes an ambivalent perspective on nature. It acts both as the vitality and the calmness, the creator as well as the destroyer of beauty and individuality. The diction of the poem is very simple and elegant, but it presents a complexity and tangibility of message and voice. I hope I've been able to explain this poem in a very simple manner. Thank you for listening.